Have you ever played a truly 7 out of 10 game? What does it mean to be a 7 out of 10? Now, if you ask IGN, they would tell you that every game is a 7 out of 10 unless it's a good game, in which case a really good game to them is probably a 6, while a really garbage game is probably a 10 out of 10. It's kind of arbitrary, honestly, but 7 out of 10 games absolutely do exist. And today I'm going to be reviewing a game called Blades of Fire. You're probably asking, why are you doing that on the gameplay channel and not the review channel? Well, mostly because I could not finish the game, and I'll be talking about that in a minute, but also because I want to test out my new microphone setup. Let me know how it sounds in the comments down below. Do I sound good? Please. But let's get into it. Blades of Fire is a third-person action combat game where it's got some Soulsy elements to it, but it has a much bigger focus on blacksmithing, armor, and then how you use your weapons, as well as what your weapon types are. As I usually do on the second channel, I am going to be talking about the pros, the cons, and a bit of the in-between. I played about 11 hours of Blades of Fire. I played the demo. I thought the demo was really cool, and I said, hey, I'm gonna buy it. This is actually really interesting, and I'm gonna jump into it. And so I did, and it immediately went downhill after where the demo ended. But let me explain exactly what this game is. Blades of Fire is a Souls-like, I guess, if you will, that is a game that kind of harkens back to old 360 era style games. And that's actually a point in its favor. I think that's actually something that's really cool. The game focuses on creating weapons as opposed to finding weapons like in a regular Souls-like. What you are doing is blacksmithing those with a relatively in-depth blacksmithing mini game, and then you are using those weapons to fight enemies. You can equip up to 4 weapons at a time, and it's kind of a good thing to have different weapons that can do different kinds of damage. There's blunt damage, piercing, and slashing damage, and enemies also have armor that is resistant to certain types of damage, and you need to match kind of what type of damage that they're weakest to in order to fight them. Combat has this sort of directional attack to it where instead of, just hitting light and heavy attacks, you have, I'm going to be talking controller terms here. You have an X button, which will attack from the left. You have the B, which will attack from the right, Y will attack from the top, and A will attack from the bottom. And if you hold those buttons down, you'll do a heavy attack in those same directions. Pretty interesting. And there is also dodge and evade and roll and stuff like that. There are iframes. There's also parry. So let's talk about pros. Graphically, I don't think this game is that bad. I think it has a very specific art style. It's not going for like hyper realistic or anything like that. And I do think it's an actually decent looking game to look at. The art style overall I found to be fairly interesting, especially with some of the enemy design and some of the bosses. I do like the look of some of the bosses, especially the boss in the Red Castle, I think is what it's called, or the Crimson Keep, I think is what it's called. I don't remember the king's name, but I did like his design, even if I didn't like the area. So I think that the graphics are okay. They're not top tier AAA hyper realistic, but they are very serviceable. And I think that some of, like I said, some of the environments look pretty nice. I think the smithing system is a massive pro for this game. It is a fairly involved system that makes you think about the weapons that you're going to make and use, or even that weapon's identity. So basically, you get to choose precisely what your weapon is and what it does. And this comes down to both the name, the type of weapon it is, and the materials that you use to create it. Different materials have different stats, and you find materials by defeating enemies and they drop. And the rarer the material, typically the more stats it'll add to the weapon. You also get to choose what the weapon shape is within its type. So there are like great axes, two-handed swords, great swords, massive war hammers, one-handed swords, daggers, stuff like that, right? And so the way that it works is you choose what type of weapon you want. There's a whole list of parts the weapon is made of, and then you choose what material each one of those parts is made from. And essentially what you're doing is then adding stats to the weapon, and you will be changing things like the weapon's durability, how fast the weapon is, how much blocking is. You can even affect your parry window for a perfect parry. You can affect blunt damage, piercing damage, slashing damage, stuff like that. And you can even affect how good the quality of the weapon is. Once you finally choose that, you then go into the smithing stage where you have the shape of the weapon drawn out, and then what you are doing is you are literally forging these gray bars across the weapon to match that shape as closely as possible. And as you do, it fills up stars. And stars are essentially how many times you can repair that weapon. So weapons have durability, and as you use them, they will take durability damage, and you can repair them at a forge or an anvil. And once you repair them, it uses one of the stars. So the more stars you have, the more times you can fully repair your weapon. Durability is a pretty interesting thing in this game because it works differently based on your weapon. Blunt weapons just have an overall durability, whereas edged weapons also have an overall durability, but they also have an edge durability. And if your weapon has a point to it, your point probably has a durability too, especially if it's a stabbing weapon. As the edge wears down, you have a sharpening stone in your pocket at all times. When you sharpen that weapon, it will regain the edge's durability, but it'll do so at the cost of the overall durability of that weapon. It's a pretty in-depth system that I think makes a lot of sense for the world that it's in. Combat, I thought, was a bit of a mixed bag, but it makes you focus on what weapons to use and when to attack. In this game, they do not reward button spamming, at least not for boss fights or more difficult enemies. If you button spam, you only have so much stamina, and it's not a lot, and you have to regain stamina by blocking, or it'll regain faster if you block. It will regain very slowly if you don't. So like I said before, attacking is also direction based, and the way that they do this is that if an enemy has armor on, certain weapons will do more damage to certain types of armor than others. You can see this with enemies changing colors visibly as you go to select your weapons. If the enemy is red, that weapon will not do hardly any damage to the enemy. If it's yellow, it'll do reduced damage, and if it's green, it'll do full damage. But what this also means is that enemies can have different armors on different parts of their body, and this actually does play into some boss fights later on. If an enemy has a green head or green feet, you would use one of your directional attacks to attack that specific part of the body to do the most damage. If an enemy has, let's say, green on its middle, but red on the top and bottom, you would want to swing a horizontal swing from the left or right to do damage. And some bosses will actually switch their vulnerability points in the fights. So it does make combat a little bit more tactical than just, I'm gonna hit the guy and do whatever damage my weapon is rated for. But also doing damage does wear down your weapon, so you may have to repair them or sharpen them mid-fight. And that's why it's good to have multiple types of weapons that do multiple types of damage. I think the enemies overall are okay, but in the time that I played, they felt fairly limited in variety. In the areas that I've been through, I have fought probably 4, maybe 5 different variations of skeleton, and that's about it. Some areas add in area-specific new enemies, but man, there are lots and lots of skeletons. And after you've killed your 500,000th skeleton, it gets a little old. So let's talk about some of the cons here. One of the big problems with combat is that enemies will just straight up ignore taking damage sometime. You'll go to maybe do an attack, or you'll go to wind up like a big heavy attack, right? But the enemy will go ahead and attack anyway. They do a lot of input reading in this game. What will happen is you might wind up for an attack and that enemy's going to hit you. And if the enemy hits you, it almost always stops you from attacking. There's a very high probability that if you go to attack an enemy and you hit them while they're attacking, it will not interrupt their attack, but they will still hit you anyway. And that is incredibly annoying in a game that is about looking for openings and trading blows. Depending on what weapon you've created and how slow it is, some of the enemies are so fast that, let's say you have a gigantic hammer, you go to swing and you've timed your attack perfectly, like, okay, this is my opening, and you'll go to swing, but it's so slow they'll already be attacking again. I've also been hit even while doing a successful dodge. There are two different ways to dodge in this game. There's evade, which lets you sidestep in a direction and it gives you an iframe. And then there is a dodge roll that will make you roll away. Evasion basically lets you iframe around attacks so that you can still set up for like a counter, whereas dodge roll literally moves you away so that way you can get some distance from the enemy. And I've had instances where I have successfully done evasions, and you know you've done it because the camera will actually do a little bit of a slow-mo effect, and I have still been hit through the animation. And even though it's done the animation and basically told me, hey, you have successfully dodged, I have still taken damage because some enemies will still be doing an attack animation that's still part of the attack they just did. And even though I dodged, that animation was still going even though my dodge had ended, and it still hits me anyway. There's a bit of jankiness here. This is not perfect in any way. And I also said it before, but enemies will absolutely input read you. You can stand in front of some enemies forever and they'll do nothing, moving closer or whatever, but as soon as you go to attack, that's when they actually attack. They are waiting for you to attack so that they can hit you through your attack and interrupt you. The next con is the story. It barely exists. One of the cool things about the demo, I will say, is that if you played the demo and then you bought the game, it actually saves your progress from the demo. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't recording the demo, so I don't have the beginning, but basically your character gets, I don't know, possessed or some sort of forge, like a great forging god sort of thing, goes into your character and you become this master forger. So I guess in this world, steel has turned to stone, and the only people who have steel are basically mages and the bad guys, but you can do it. You can make it. And then all of a sudden you hear a bit of a battle. There's a priest who's gotten attacked and he has a guy with him, like a kid, and he gets killed and he gives you his sword, and then the game teaches you how to play, and then you're like, I'm gonna kill the evil queen.
Time to go, lad. I'm going to the palace. You can join me if you like.
The palace? What for?
I'm going to kill the queen.
And that's the story. And basically the whole game is you trying to get to the final area to kill this queen. That's the whole story. It's very light. There is a lot of lore to the world, but I've said this before and I'll say it again. Lore is not story. Lore is just what makes the world feel alive. The story is what your character actually goes through. And in this game, there's no real story, at least as far as I am concerned. But what about the characters? They're bland. Every one of them are bland. And the ones that are a little bit more talkative and have personality, they are more annoying than anything. In particular, there is a character later on who he's like a ghost. He's helping you get through this graveyard area, and this is actually where I quit the game. I played in this area for about 5 hours or so, it feels like, and I still haven't left it yet. And every single time an enemy shows up, he disappears. And every single time he disappears or reappears after enemies leave, he has to say something. And it's usually the same 2 or 3 different lines, and it's really annoying.
I'm more nervous than a ghost at an exorcism.
And there's another character, the one who follows you around the whole time. I think his name is Adso. He basically goes through and chronicles your adventure. There is a chance that every time you go to climb a ladder or a vine or a rope or something, or if you're in a combat situation and leave, he will say something also. And the developers know that he's annoying as hell because they have given you a dedicated button on the D-pad to send him back to home base so that you don't have to listen to him talk. So yeah, that's a thing. Your main character doesn't really say a lot. He's very just basic generic dude who you could just call him John of Fire. So let's talk about the voice acting, because this is something that I think needs to really be touched on. The characters aren't really all that good. They're not very interesting, right? But the voice acting is okay. And normally if I think the voice acting is like serviceable or okay, or doesn't have anything like super weird about it, I probably wouldn't say anything. However, there is at least one character, it's I think Adso, who while the acting itself isn't terrible, I don't think any of the voice acting itself is like particularly bad, but the audio quality like the recording quality. I don't know if it's the mixing or what have you, but there were parts of this where when I heard him talk, it sounded like I was hearing the room he was in. I could definitely hear like a set of reverb to him that honestly just, it didn't sound natural. It didn't sound like it was in the game itself. It sounded like he was in a recording booth or something.
Barely eaten, kid.
I would have died if you hadn't showed up.
Yes. I was too late. Too late for your old friend.
You must be Aaron, right? Abbot Doran told me he saw you at Queen Naria's coronation.
That was a long time ago.
Abbot Doran said it was a miracle you were still alive. We were looking for you. He said that all my questions would be answered as soon as we found you. Now he's dead.
Aye.
He wanted me to give you this. Wouldn't even let me look at it.
And so that to me was very jarring the first time I heard it. And I may go back and play through like the first part of the game again, like where the demo is, so that you can hear it. Cause it was like within the first few lines that I noticed it, and it continued from then on. Sometimes it wasn't so bad, but like there were times where it was really bad. So other than that, the voice acting itself, not terrible. It just wasn't anything spectacular either. Then you have the maps. One of my biggest problems with this game really comes down to map design. Each map kind of has its own little gimmick, if you will. The Crimson Keep is where my enjoyment of the game started to rapidly decline. So the problem with most of the maps in this game is that they are very claustrophobic feeling, even if they're outdoors. It's a lot of like tunnels or hallways, or even if you're outdoors, ledges. Like if you're going down a pathway, there are cliffs beside you. So there's a swamp level and it's a little bit more open, but even when you get in there, then you start getting trees and tons of foliage and you can't really see what you're doing. And so everything feels incredibly claustrophobic. The maps are all very maze-like. So if you are looking more into that sort of Metroidvania style of exploration of the map, that's where this comes in. But the problem is that in most of the maps, there's a little bit of a gimmick. The Crimson Keep has a bit of a gimmick where there is a child who is like a skeleton child, and there are characters who want to steal the child and take him away. And there's a whole section of the game, I think it's a library section. It's basically in one room or one building, but it spirals down. And the whole time you're essentially going downwards through all these different rooms, fighting enemies. It's like Yoshi's Island here. If you do anything that, or you take damage or you roll or whatever, the kid is on your shoulders the whole time, he'll fall off. And if he falls off and is on the ground for too long, one, he'll start cowering and crying, Yoshi's Island style. And then an enemy will come up and pick them up and run off with them. If you don't kill the enemy fast enough and get the kid back, the kid gets taken away to a room, and then you got to figure out where the kid is. It's so annoying. It's one of the most frustrating areas of the game. The whole time you're making your way down, you're basically getting to different stairwells. There's a big stairwell in the middle that goes down, but it's barred off. So you're going through rooms and falling down holes until you can find an area of the stairwell where you can open up a gate, and it acts as like a fast point. So you don't have to do all that again. But that whole area is frustrating. It plummeted any sort of enjoyment that I had for this game. And then it gets worse later on with the graveyard, where I feel like these maps overstay their welcome. They are too long, and by the time I'm done with them, I'm just exhausted. The other half of the Crimson Keep is once you get to the final boss, it's actually a little bit before you get to the final boss. It's the king of the Crimson Keep. he wanders the keep once you get to a certain point. You'll fight him once. He cannot die. He will respawn a little bit later anywhere on the keep, and he will chase you down if he sees you. He will follow you and chase you. And it becomes this really annoying area of the game where you cannot just simply kill everything and explore around a little bit because this guy keeps coming back. And I never want to go back there. That's followed up with the graveyard sequence, which has the guy who won't shut the fuck up. So the maps overstay their welcome and they hurt the pacing of the game. In Souls type games, when you die, you lose your money, your experience, your currency, whatever. In this game, when you die, you drop whatever weapon you have currently equipped on the ground. I believe if you die again, and I've not had this happen, but I believe if you die again, you lose that weapon. So there is no experience, there's nothing, and there's nothing here that will make you stronger. One of the benefits of at least fighting your way back to your old experience in a Souls type game is that you gain experience on the way back. And then when you pick up your experience that you lost, if you do, you will now have more experience than when you died, meaning that there's a possibility you could work your way into getting another skill point or another level up point. That would make you stronger overall. But here, that doesn't exist. You need to go and get your weapon because upgrades are done by finding chests. So what this means is that every time you die, instead of getting stronger by fighting those enemies, you actually just don't even want to fight him at all. Instead, the whole thing now is just death running back to your weapon so you can touch it and pick it back up. Because if you lose your weapon, now you have to spend even more resources that you gathered crafting a new one. And now you've just lost resources. Because there's no experience to make yourself stronger, everything is done through farming resources, and you get those resources by killing enemies. It means that there's kind of no point to really fighting all the enemies in order to get stronger. The only reason you really want to fight enemies is to at least maybe clear out the map so you can explore, or to farm for resources to make a new weapon. The exploration in this game really isn't that great. Once again, the only upgrades to your character that you can find are health, stamina, star upgrades for weapons, flask upgrades, and then also the types of items that you can put on your weapons from statues. And these are done by finding chests, and when you open the chest, there's like a little codex inside, and it's like, oh, that's a summoner's cryptarch, or that's a forger's cryptex, or whatever the hell he says. And then he reads it, you can then put a point into something. If you find 4 health stones, it increases your overall health. If you find 4 stamina, it increases your overall stamina. The end, that is it. And so exploration is kind of weak, in my opinion, and it really doesn't lend much to the game. It doesn't really make me want to look around because I'm not going to find anything amazing. And I did miss this earlier, I'll say this now, but in order to find new weapons, you do have to kill enemies. It's not just that you know all the weapons, but certain enemies will unlock certain weapons. So if you kill 30 undead, you might now get to use a curved sword or something like that, right? That's how you unlock it. So you need to kill X number of specific enemies to get specific weapon. I couldn't finish this game because once I got past the Crimson Keep, I was so annoyed with it. And even after like what felt like 5 hours in the crypts in the graveyard, I couldn't do anymore. I could not fight another fucking skeleton. I was so done with it. That's why this is on this channel, because it is not a finished game. I like to finish the games that I play for review, but I just simply could not do it here. So that being said, that has been Blades of Fire. It is thoroughly a 7 out of 10 game. Could I sit down and finish it? Yeah. Do I really want to? No. And I don't think it's like particularly bad. It's just that parts of it are not great. And it does have a little bit of jank, and I think that that really is like a true 7 out of 10 experience. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like on it. Feel free to subscribe, hit that notification bell. I'll see you guys next time. Let me know about the sound and the audio quality. I do really want to know your feedback on that. I'll see you guys next time. BubbaTV24 signing out.